Good evening and welcome to the University of Connecticut's Digital Media and Design's coverage of the 2020 election. This is an historic day in American history, and over the next 30 minutes or so, our team will share a unique view of today's election. The view from a digital media perspective. What's that, you ask? Well, instead of exit polls, we'll be watching and analyzing what people are saying on digital media platforms to get insight into what's happening on the ground today. For those new to this field of study, we have the capability through our own software to view all publicly available digital and social media data and analyze that information. This provides us with insights which we believe will depict a more accurate view of what's going on than traditional exit polling data. With that said, tonight we'll be looking at the presidential race nationally, in swing states, and globally. We'll also be watching some key Senate races. We have a panel of experts that have joined us tonight to bring us their experience and perspective. Before we get started, I want to note that our broadcast is adhering to all UConn COVID-19 safety protocols. And as a side note, we'll also be on Twitter at UConnSmack starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, where you can follow along. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's panel. We have with us Ryan Young, a senior from Long Island, New York, who'll be joining us from the Social Media Command Center on the campus of the University of Connecticut. Ryan, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, John. I'm Ryan Young, and I am at the Social Media Analytics Command Center here at UConn. Behind me, you're going to be able to see 4 screens all night. These 4 screens are going to be able to show you data that's coming in every couple of minutes. The top screen is the Command Center. The Command Center, we will get into more later, but has the ability to see the sentiment for Trump and Biden live, the themes that are being talked about tonight, and all the most recent results that are coming in. The other 3 screens, you'll be able to see 3 swing states that we picked out tonight for this live coverage. We have Texas, we have Florida, and we have Pennsylvania. On those screens later, we'll be talking about the sentiment for those states, the share of topics for Trump and Biden, and also the amount of results that are coming in and the engagement that comes with those results.
Great, thank you, Ryan. We also have with us Christina McDonnell, a senior from Bolton, Connecticut, who will be reporting from UConn's Digital Media and Design headquarters at the Bishop Center. Christina, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Christina, and I'm joining from the, as John said, the Bishop Center, which is the DMD headquarters. Tonight, I'm going to be going over the general strategies that each candidate has had over the past election and kind of breaking down what it is and what people are talking about on social media and the success and the different signs that'll help signal us towards our predictions to determine the outcome of the election based on the performance of each candidate over the past 6 months.
Great, thanks, Christina. We also have Rosalie Garcia, a senior from Plainfield, Connecticut. Rose, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm Rose. I'm a senior in broadcasting from home in Plainfield. I've been working on this team for 2 semesters. Tonight, I'm specifically focusing on how the Trump team has been making a concentrated effort to cast doubt on the voting system as a whole through 2 primary means, fear tactics and calling on the Trump supporters. And I'll be getting into that in a little bit.
Great, thanks, Rose. Also joining us tonight is Jeremy Pressman, political science professor at the University of Connecticut. Welcome to our team tonight, Jeremy.
John, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm an associate professor of political science and director of Middle East studies at the University of Connecticut. Tonight, I'm thinking about 2 things, really. One is the way we can see ourselves through the eyes of other people around the world. And so I want to talk a little bit later about what some of the other countries in the world are thinking and how closely they're paying attention. And the other thing I think that follows a little bit from what Rose just said is about how the world is thinking about American democracy. You know, we talk here about a lot of anxiety about whether our democracy is healthy or not. but the rest of the world also cares about whether the United States is healthy or not in terms of democracy. And so I think we should be thinking about that as well.
Great, Jeremy. Welcome aboard, and I look forward to talking to you about that. All right, so let's get things started. I know we have a lot to cover tonight. Let's start out with Rose. Rose, I know you did some social media research over the past couple of months regarding Donald Trump's effort to undermine voter trust in the election process itself. Based upon what you're seeing in your social media research, did he have an impact creating some uncertainty? What did you find?
It is my belief that he has had an impact. I started following him in early September, but he's been following these tactics since about Super Tuesday. And we can see in the data that 24% of the conversation surrounding voting has the word fraud or voter fraud or anything else relating to fears and uncertainties about the voting system. We can see that Americans are increasingly nervous about the mail-in system in particular because he has cut funding for USPS. And we can see also that voter intimidation tactics, such as him calling on his supporters in order to be poll watchers and make sure that nothing nefarious, according to the president, is occurring at these on-site polling places. And this is particularly interesting because you can see in later data that Democratic-leaning voters and Biden supporters are much more likely to vote by mail, while Trump supporters are much more likely to vote in person. And this can be seen in, this is reflective, of the messaging that he's put out and that his team has put out, informing the people that read his stuff and listen to his conferences that in fact this system is not secure and that there isn't a lot that can be done about it except make sure yourself that you are doing everything you can to make sure that your vote is counted. And this can be seen in how he has told people to vote twice, in which there was an uptick in conversation after that. There was an uptick in conversation after there was actually legal action threatened against Texas. No, not Texas. I'm very sorry. Threatened against Georgians for having done voting twice. And we can see this in the actual voting patterns of Americans. So yes, I do believe, based off of the numbers and the graphs, that there is an actual belief and effect of what he's been saying.
So you could see actually in the data that when there were key moments, like when he said vote twice, or any of those other key phrases he tweeted out or spoke to, you saw spikes in engagement where he was able to get some traction on those messages.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see these spikes early around Super Tuesday when he was saying that the election is full of fraud, up till December when he started saying to vote twice. And even after he even started calling on supporters to be poll watchers and to make sure there's no fraudulent behavior happening at their polling places.
Great, great. Beautiful, Rose. Thank you so much for that insight. I'm going to move on to our next topic. I know that when we were analyzing the race itself, it took us some time to figure out what Biden's strategy was. Donald Trump is such a force on social media. He dominates social media. And even he himself stated on the 60 Minutes interview recently that if it wasn't for social media, he would not be here. With that social media dominance, he breaks all the basic formulas that we typically use here in our command center to typically tell us who's winning. We couldn't quite figure out what Biden was up to because he really wasn't doing a lot on social media early on. What was Biden up to? Christina, I know that you were looking at that. Could you tell us what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, just here's some background info to really show the dominance that Donald Trump has on the social channels and any social content created. So red is Donald Trump and blue is Joe Biden. And if you see here, this is just results over the past week. Donald Trump is dominating overall conversation with over 6.2 million results that have been engaged with over 5 times. So that means that at least 5 people have clicked, shared, or liked that post, versus the highest that Biden hit was 2.9 thousand. So that's a little under half of the amount of social conversation that Joe Biden is having compared to Donald Trump about the specific candidates. And then when you look at overall reach, which is the amount of times their name showing up to people, it's the divide is just as much. So you have Trump at 100.4 billion in reach versus 68.7 for Joe Biden. That's a difference of 30 billion in reach. And some people might be wondering, like, there's not that many people in the world. Reach is based on the amount of times it's shown. So if it's shown five times to the same person, that counts reach. But either way, Donald Trump is more engaged in that social conversation, which is that most important of that component. And you can see here, this is over the past 7 days share of topics. This is over the past 30 days. And this is over the last 3 months. The ratio really has not changed. There's been no shift in the dominance of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden in the conversation. And a lot of this is even more so than just the fact that he's an incumbent, while it does give a little bit of an edge in terms of social conversation, because people are going to be talking about the current president a little bit more. He's always been dominating the social conversation ever since 2016. And there's been no change and no traction in Joe Biden. So when looking at this initial data, one obviously wonders, like, what is Joe Biden doing? Because nothing's changing, nothing has changed. And is there even a way for Joe Biden to kind of beat out Donald Trump and beat him at his own game, which is social media? And there actually is a way, and you really see that when you look at overall sentiment. So when breaking down sentiment over the past 6 months, which is this graph right here, there really has been no change for either candidate. I know it might be a little iffy, but it's just basically straight lines. There's a little bit of an up for Biden in July, right around that Black Lives Matter movement, but otherwise than that, they're pretty consistent. And for the most part, Biden is only a couple points ahead of of Donald Trump, in terms of overall sentiment and net sentiment. However, when you break down and factor in the fact that Donald Trump's having so much more social conversation, you can actually see that there's a clear edge for Joe Biden in terms of sentiment. So when you look at Donald Trump lineup here, I know you can't probably read the numbers, but Donald Trump has sentiment over the past 30 days has had 913,000 conversations negatively surrounding Donald Trump, versus Joe Biden is at 441,000. And when you look at that, that's a huge base of people that don't like Donald Trump. So what are they going to do? They're going to vote for Joe Biden, versus that a lot smaller group of people that are voting against Joe Biden and for Donald Trump. And that's the same when you're looking at positive sentiment. While Donald Trump might have more in numbers, his negative sentiment and the amount of people that are negatively talking about him is not overcoming that positive conversation. So that kind of brings me to really what Joe Biden looks like he has identified as the main root of this campaign. And this is kind of shown through a word cloud of showing different key topics. And so you can see here on Biden's side, most of the conversation is surrounding himself and Donald Trump and nothing else. And that's the same with Donald Trump, it's himself and Joe Biden. So that kind of shows that based on the social media data, the race itself is not about those key issues like pro-choice versus pro-life, climate change. It's actually about each candidate. So when people are voting, they're not voting for Donald Trump or for Biden. They're voting against Donald Trump. So Biden has identified this and decided to stay out of the social conversation because he understands that with Donald Trump being in the news every single day, there's no way that he's going to catch up to that. So instead, he identifies himself as just the person, not Donald Trump. So I could run and probably have similar numbers when looking at this social media data, because it's not a race for Biden and his issues and for Donald Trump and his issues. It's whether or not people want Donald Trump as a leader and if they're going to vote for him or against him.
So Christina, it took us a while to figure this out, but I think we finally got to the place where Joe Biden realized you can't beat Donald Trump on social media. He's the king. But what he could do is let Donald Trump be the king of social media, let the whole campaign be about Donald Trump, and it's either you vote up or a vote down about Donald Trump. And that's what his strategy was. The data is showing it. The numbers have been consistent for months now. They're consistent again today. This is a referendum on Donald Trump, and that's what we're seeing on the social data. Is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you could really see that when you go back to that general sentiment, that's what's going to pay off is all those people, that 913 that are interacting with negative, those are the people who are going out because they hate Donald Trump that much that they're going to be voting against him. And it's just as powerful as a base for him.
Got it. Beautiful. Thank you, Christina. That's really insightful. We'll come back to you guys later. Next up, Ryan. I know that you're manning the live command center as you shared in your intro earlier. Is there anything you're seeing right now as people are on social media, they're chatting as the day's going along? Is something jumping out at you as a leading indicator?
Yeah, I've been looking at this. Everything just keeps changing. It's very interesting because on the top, one of the main things is sentiment when we look at this. And like Christina just said, we know the numbers for Trump are very high compared to Biden's. But when you look at that sentiment, it's very interesting to see that you can see Trump's sentiment updated live right now is about a negative 15% net sentiment. And the reason why you'll see that politics is always going to be negative. So it's really not a fair assessment to say, oh, they're both negative. No one likes both these candidates. So instead, you want to really look at those numbers that are the net negative sentiment. So for this one, Trump, negative 15%. For Biden, it's been around negative 9%. It just updated right now, about the same. And one of the things that has stuck out to me while you guys were talking, while I was looking at this, is definitely the themes. On this side, you can see the themes that are being talked about right now. And one that just, as they get mentioned more and more, they keep growing in this theme bubble. And one thing that keeps growing for the last hour, I keep seeing it rise up a little bit closer to the middle. The middle right now is presidential election. Obviously, that one will most likely stay the same all night. But human rights is something that keeps getting bigger and bigger. It started a couple down, and I noticed that one. Popular vote, and electoral vote are going head to head. People are talking about those a lot. And obviously, American people. American people has been mentioned a lot. Early voting, those are some that have been mentioned a lot of times. And then if you look at the bottom, this chart that's going on, this is for the last 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours. And you see it died down at the start of today, but as the hours have gone on, it went up. Both saw spikes around that 1 o'clock time. But as the day went on, you do see Trump's go a little bit lower than Biden's, and that's overall results. So it seems to be that Biden, they both went down as the night's going on, but Biden's did stay up for a little longer, which could be a good indication for him. And then the other thing that we get is the most recent results. A lot of these results that I'm seeing are people for pro-Trump and pro-Biden, but a lot of them are talking about those swing states that we're going to talk about later. It seems like a lot of people are a little indifferent on who's winning those swing states, who's big in those states, and a lot of people are talking about that.
Right. Well done, Ryan. Thanks a lot. That was really interesting. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Thanks for your Steve Kornacki impersonation. Really appreciate it. All right, Jeremy, with all that data conversation, I want to get your perspective on being a poli-sci professor and an expert in international studies. From our allies' perspective, and maybe more broadly from an international audience itself, what does this election's outcome mean to them and how they view our democracy? What are you seeing?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I think we have to recognize that the world has different views about Donald Trump as Americans do. There's a lot of interest, obviously, because the United States plays an outsized role in international affairs. So decisions made here have an influence on a lot of different countries. And so you see a variation in countries in the Middle East like Israel and Saudi Arabia that have done quite well in the last 4 years in terms of their relations with the Trump administration. I think there's some trepidation, right, about the possibility of change and whether, not that Biden would throw them under the bus, but that those close relations could be a little sticky. At the same time, Donald Trump, at least rhetorically, has often been quite negative towards some long traditional West European US allies. Tension rhetorically again with Germany, with France, And so I think in those countries, you see a little bit more openness to the idea of a change. Joe Biden comes from the foreign policy establishment. And just, one little factoid that came out this week that was interesting, some pollsters did a poll across the United Kingdom of who people would vote for. And 76% said they would vote for Biden. Now, bear in mind, that's a country that's ruled by a conservative party, the Tory party, and yet major support for Biden and major concern. And so I think we see this split among our allies, but it's partly related to their relationship with the Trump administration.
That kind of matches up with, I was looking at some of the data earlier, Jeremy. I saw a lot of conversation coming out of the UK, France, Russia, and the Middle East, where if you looked at the whole globe, there was still a lot of interest, a lot of social media conversation coming from those regions, which kind of matches up with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't mention Russia, but of course, Russia has been a prominent actor, let's say, in US political conversations in the last 4 or 5 years, both debates about Russian interference in the 2016 election, but also conversations about the relationship between Putin and Trump and who's what a Biden administration might do differently. The other thing I think that's important to think about is the United States has long projected itself, certainly since World War II, as a beacon of democracy, right? Not only do we claim to know how to run democracy here, but we spend a lot of time promoting democracy, spreading democracy. The Iraq invasion in 2003 was partly justified by the Bush administration in terms of democratization. And I don't make any claim that this has been a successful project or that it's the right project, but I think empirically it's been central to American identity in the world. And so I think when other countries look at the United States and they see voter suppression, they see the president saying maybe he'll leave office, maybe he won't if he leaves. When they talk about voter intimidation and people showing up at polls with machine guns, but those kind of things lead people in other countries to ask questions. Is this really the United States still, was it ever, but is it now, a representation of democracy and the people? And so I think in that sense, I think there's some concern as well.
I think it'd be worth looking at as we listen in on the social media conversations in the coming weeks and months as to what citizens of those countries are saying about us. A good place to do some research and study to see how they really feel about us as they go on their own social media platforms and talk.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. We're going to come back to you in a little bit, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ryan, I want to turn back to our local version of Steve Kornacki, and can you tell us what we're seeing in some of the swing states that we selected to look at tonight?
Yeah. So on the top right here, this one's going to be Florida. What we can see right now, so this is over the last 30 days. What we're seeing is Trump again. He controls the conversation. He has 68,000 mentions in the last month in Florida, and he also, and compared to Joe Biden's 37,000. One thing that we could definitely look at is engagement, though. So engagement, Trump has 35 million. Biden has 27 million. Now, what does that really mean? It means that these numbers of engagement are very close. No matter how much Trump controls this conversation with the results, Biden is seeing a good engagement. And his engagement is up 10 million from the previous month. So he's seeing a rise. Then we look at the sentiment. For the sentiment, Trump, again, has overall way more results. So what we've noticed is that instead of looking at those percentages that don't really show you the actual numbers, we look at those actual numbers. Trump, 25,000 negative sentiment mentions compared to Biden's 12,000. That's a difference of 13,000. When you look at the positive, it's only a difference of 3,000. So you take those numbers, you look at the net sentiment. Now, the net sentiment is putting all those numbers together and really seeing what is happening. Trump has, again, the worst negative sentiment, net sentiment. But another thing to look at is that both of the candidates are going up. They're both seeing a more positive spike, and that can come from their supporters supporting them more, because it's getting closer to election days within the last 30 days compared to the previous.
Yeah, and I think, Ryan, as we're going to see later in the show, when we look at the amount of effort being put out there on the various platforms from the candidates, not only the candidates' own social media channels, but their major influencers. It's a big push to get a lot of positive content out there in the last few days.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be able to see that.
So it looks like Florida's pretty tight. Biden's doing better than we thought in Florida. Just quickly in the other states, is it similar?
Yeah. So in the other states, I would say overall it's pretty similar. Pennsylvania, which you can see on this bottom one, is pretty close to Florida. Way less numbers wise, like engagement and results, but the numbers are the same. And then when we look at the bottom over here, Texas, the numbers are very close together. They're even closer together than they are in Florida. The net sentiments are only 1% away. And I think that has to do with it being Texas. But I would say Texas is probably the closest, and Florida and Pennsylvania are a little more similar.
Great. We're going to do some predictions later in the show. So thanks for that, Ryan.
Yep.
What I want to do now, panel, is I want to open it up. Jeremy, I know you're looking at all this social media conversation. Is there something that jumps out at you that you just like to ask the panel?
Yeah, well, just a comment first, which is amazing data, and it's amazing to see digging into it to understand how you can get a lot of mentions, but if they're negative, it may come back to bite you. But in terms of questions, I was just thinking about, in political science, we often talk about large structural factors like the economy, COVID, the campaign decisions. But then other people say, no, don't focus on those big structural things. Focus on the individual leaders and personalities, in this case, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And so I just wanted to ask, does the data tell us anything about what's driving all this? Is it being driven more by the personalities and the individual quirks and aspects of Biden and Trump? Or is it really more the larger factors that are out of their control, like the economy and COVID and other things?
Great question. I'd like to ask Rose and Christina. You both studied this from different angles. You could jump in here and share your thoughts.
Absolutely. I think that it 100% comes down to personality in the presidential race, at least. When looking at those word maps that I had shown earlier, the only words that come up or the key conversations that are happening are Donald Trump, are Joe Biden, and that's talking about each other as well. I would say it's not a norm. So when you're looking at even specific Senate races, that did have key issues. But I think that Donald Trump as himself is such a unique candidate. And it's the same reason why I think there was failure in 2016. It's because we had a candidate talking about issues versus a candidate that was just Donald Trump and being Donald Trump. And that's why people were either voting or against him. So in this particular race, when you have such a personality that is Donald Trump, it overshadows all the other key issues because there's so much passion about his specific personality. And then that kind of bleeds into the other candidate as well. Because if you're saying, I'm not voting for Donald Trump because of his personality, why are you voting for Joe Biden because of his personality, right? So it's analyzing, and because his personality itself is so divisive, it becomes the number one issue. I know so many people talk about like temper, and that's a big thing that people talk about. I think he's to do foreign policy and stuff. When your personality is that divisive, that's the biggest worry for people when voting.
Yeah, Christina, I just want to add on before I turn it over to Rose. I've been following presidential elections since the 60s. Yeah, I'm that old. This might be the first one that I can remember that's all about personality. I just haven't heard a lot of talk about detailed foreign policy, detailed anything. I mean, there's obviously mentions of these policies, Jeremy, but we don't get into the details. It seems to be about the personality. Rose, what are you seeing? I know that you were looking into a lot of President Trump's tactics. Are you seeing the same thing?
I am actually. I'm going to have to agree with both of you. I think that this particular election is much more focused on who is running instead of what policies are running. And You can see this a lot even in places that you can't collect data on. Like you can't collect data a lot of the time on places like YouTube videos or TikTok videos or things that tend to be more audio focused. But you can see in these platforms that a majority of Americans spend their time on. YouTube continues to be the second most popular social media website to spend your time on. You can see that these conversations always have the policy or the issue secondary to the person. And this shift was almost immediate when Donald Trump was confirmed as the Republican nominee back in 2016. So yes, it is 100% a personality race. The question then becomes, will the next election also be a personality race? Is this setting a precedent? Or will it go back to some sense of what we used to call normalcy? Or is that unachievable? Are the American people kind of sick of that and they want something new?
Well, that's a great point, Jeremy. Just to wrap up this segment of the conversation, I'm wondering if we've made a pivot in our society where, because of reality TV and the dominance of social media and the platforms, if we're beginning to be more about personality than detail. And I guess we won't know for a little bit, but it's certainly what we're seeing now. And the data is showing it for sure, this, at least in this election, this cycle. That's a great segue. I want to turn back to Ryan. And Ryan, if you could show us just a sample on one of the screens of what the top content has been on the various platforms over the last 24 hours.
Yeah. So when looking at the top 20 to 24 top results and with the highest actions, which are people commenting, liking, you see that 10 out of the 24, so almost half, are from Fox News, actually. And that's on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
The top content in the last 24 hours is all by Fox News.
Yeah, I would on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So all three social media platforms. Here's just one example of it. This was posted to Facebook after, but this is a Fox News article about Amy Coney Barrett. And when you look at it, it's this one's also on Facebook, and they even have on Instagram the same kind of setup.
So we're seeing here, so Fox News is the largest influencer in the last 24 hours regarding this presidential campaign.
Yep, definitely.
And when I was looking at this data earlier in the day, Ryan, one of the largest pieces of content, the influencers for Biden, was the Lincoln Group.
Yeah.
It kind of was telling me if it wasn't for the Lincoln Group, that this whole board would be either the Republican Party or Fox News making a huge push on social media in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the top actions, like you said, are Fox News. Other than that, there is the Lincoln Project. And then other than that, it's a couple of celebrities here and there that are trying to get their voice out for people to vote, which makes absolute sense because they obviously have those higher reaches. But Fox News is the biggest, the Lincoln Project for Biden. But Fox News is totally dominating.
Are they dominating on every platform or just?
Yeah, no, every platform. On Instagram, I was able to bring up this Instagram post. This one again about Amy Coney Barrett. But this one is from Fox on Facebook and Twitter. When you go to Twitter, it's the same data.
Yeah, what jumps out at me when I see that, Ryan, is, I grew up in an era where the news was the news. But when we see a news media as the largest influencer, and if we analyze their content through our other means to determine, is it a pro-Trump message or an anti-Biden message, or is it just news? That's really telling. Jeremy, doesn't that jump out at you?
Yeah, I agree that the media environment has changed, and it's no more Walter Cronkite, right? I don't have to tell you that.
Right.
But Fox has really built an incredible apparatus to influence American politics.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you, Ryan, for that. All right, so we've got a few minutes left, and I want to go around the room with the social media analyst team. I know you've all been looking at the data off and on over the last 24 hours. Let's get some predictions. Definitely, I want to hear who you think is going to win the presidential race tonight. Let's make a call. And if you know any swing states that you want to call, feel free to share with our audience. So why don't we go to Rose first? Rose, what do you think?
I think that if he hasn't already, that Trump is absolutely going to win Florida. And I think that that's a really big swing state. I would say, honestly, that I unfortunately think that Trump is going to win this one.
You calling it for Trump?
Unfortunately.
Oh, that's your job. You're looking at the data. Thank you, Rose. Christina, what are you calling for tonight?
I actually disagree with Rose. First, I think that regardless of the Electoral College, I think that Biden's going to win the popular vote. There's really no doubt in my mind for that. It's just a matter of if he's going to be able to get the right states to win that Electoral College. I think it's going to be tight, but I think he's going to do it either by means of Pennsylvania or honestly, I'm kind of thinking Texas might be a surprise tonight.
Great. Ryan, your thoughts. You're looking at the big board. What do you see?
Yeah. I think that Christina I'm going to go off that. I think after looking at this dashboard, which has Texas, I think it's a lot closer than I would have thought a couple weeks ago. So with the data looking at it now, I think overall it will be Biden. I think, like we've been saying this whole time, social media, Trump controls that. But when you really look at the data, I think the negative sentiment and also the engagement is something that is going to help Biden when we're just talking social media wise. And the other two swing states that we looked at, I think Pennsylvania, Biden has a really good shot based on these numbers, and same with Florida. So it's definitely going to be a lot closer in Texas, but I'm going to have to agree with Christina and say that he does definitely have the chance to also win Texas. So Biden overall, I think.
All right. So now it comes back to me. I was looking at the data starting mid-afternoon. I knew I'd have to make the call. So here's what I'm saying. Popular vote, I think Biden will win by a good margin, but it's going to come down to swing states, as we all know. And I think Biden is going to win a majority of the swing states based upon the data that I'm seeing. And a lot of it has to do with the net sentiment analysis that you were sharing, Ryan. And I'm calling it for Biden, and I think he's going to win by a good margin. All right, I think that wraps up our initial election show for 2020. I want to thank our panel, Ryan, Jeremy, Christina, Rose, and our production team, Heather and Ryan behind the scenes, and Mike Toomey. Without you guys, we wouldn't be on the air. A lot went on behind the scenes to make this happen tonight, so I want to thank everybody. And before I sign off, I want to make sure to mention, please follow us on Twitter tonight, UConnSmack. We're going to be live on Twitter from 7 till late tonight, sharing updates of what we're seeing on social media, see if it matches what we're seeing for the real results. So with that, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. And please wear a mask, stay safe. And if you haven't voted and you're out west, please go vote. Thanks, everybody. Good night.